Hello and welcome to Lesson 2. The problem is women, not men. In the opening chapter, I made the bold claim that managing relationships is actually quite simple. I told you the not-so-secret secret of having loving, intimate, passionate, inspiring relationships in marriage is, if you are a woman, ask your husband, what is it I can do for you today to have him be happy? Whatever he says, do it for him if you can. If you are a man, ask your wife what it is that you can do for her today to have her be happy. Whatever she says, do it for her. Do it for her if you can. I told you the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or, put in another form, it is, do not do anything to anyone else that you would not wish done to yourself. Or, put in another form, it is, do not ask anyone else to do anything for you that you are not prepared to do yourself or that you are not willing to compensate the other person for if you do not want to do what you're asking the other person to do on your behalf. I told you that if you adopt this sort of attitude towards those in your life you wish to be in relationships with, then your relationships will vastly improve in quality, which will then translate into a similar transformation in the quality of your own life. I also said that this works especially well within a marriage. Of course, there are other things you might wish to learn and other actions you might wish to take. However, just asking your husband or wife what it is that you can do for them today to make them be happy and keeping this a relatively balanced exercise will dramatically improve the quality of your marriage. This has been proven over and over again. I also pointed out that the men I counselled, which was about 1/3 of the people who sought me out, 100% of the men were willing to try out this advice to good results. I also pointed out that women I counselled, which was about 2/3 of the people who sought me out, only about 10% of the women were willing to try this advice, and those 10% gained good results. At the time, the late 90s, I did not think too much about why it might be that every woman who gave me an objection gave me the same objection. But what if I did not want to give him what he asked for? The same objection every time. I thought it strange, but I just did not think about it at all. I had other issues on my mind, providing for a family of 6 with a wife who was actively undermining my every effort, being the item that was taking up most of my intellectual capacity, I can assure you. I did not really think about all this deeply until May 2008. This was just after I came out of being suicidal for the month of April 2008. The woman who was my prospective wife 2.0 had started acting like Jennifer immediately that I had said the C word. Women know what that word is. It's the word commitment. Women ask men to make a commitment to a relationship while reserving the right for themselves to destroy marriages for no reason at all. Do unto others? Really? I want a commitment from you, but I reserve the right to destroy our marriage for no reason at all? This is do unto others? I don't think so. Women want special privileges in relationships, and this is destroying their ability to maintain those relationships. Because this woman suddenly started acting like Jennifer, as soon as I said the C word, commitment, a giant red flag was waving in front of my face, as you could well imagine. Now, I also have to say this, prospective wife 2.0 was absolutely perfect in every way. She was perfect for me. She was the best woman I had ever met from my own cultural background. There was nothing wrong with her. Indeed, everything about her was perfect. I was amazed that God had moved in his mysterious ways and brought us together. I was thanking my lucky stars, truly. This is why I was so bemused that she had started acting like Jennifer. The obvious question being, how could 2 women who were 10 years apart in age and who grew up in different towns possibly act the same way and even use the same phrases when being disrespectful to me? It was a question that intrigued me for a few days before I came up with the answer. it was obvious that both were the victims of what is called psychological operations to instill in them these ideas. It has a more popular name. It is called propaganda. It is also called brainwashing. People can be led to believe the most ridiculous of things if they are appropriately brainwashed and propagandized. The only way that these two women could have behaved the same way and used the same phrases is if they had a common source of brainwashing and propaganda. This, of course, has very serious implications. It means that the propaganda and brainwashing is deliberate, and that these two women had been deliberate targets and victims of this propaganda and brainwashing. So, I set about to find out the source of this brainwashing and propaganda. I thought it would be very subtle and hard to find. I thought it would be a small group who somehow targeted similar women in some way. I knew Jennifer's history, and so I worked through it to find where could she have possibly been in touch with similar people to Prospective Wife 2.0. As I stepped further and further back to find similar messages that they had been presented, imagine my surprise when it became obvious that the entire mainstream media was indulging in brainwashing and propagandizing women into the very ideas that these two women had expressed. Now, I know that sounds unbelievable, so if you do not believe me, watch any sitcom. The man is a useless oaf and the woman is Mrs. Wonderful. The woman hits the man, it's funny. The woman dominates and controls, period. Just look at series like Everyone Loves Raymond. Ray is a beta-mangina beggar who is regularly slapped by his wife. Look at the Alan Harper character on 2.5 Men. Look at Homer Simpson in The Simpsons, the most successful, quote, successful cartoon franchise in history, where the two male characters are total losers. Bart is an underachiever and proud of it. The fact that Matt Groening is a 33-degree Freemason who has dedicated his life to the most popular propaganda piece in all of history might give you reason to wonder just why a 33-degree Mason thinks this is the most important thing to do in his life. Look at any of the mainstream Hollywood movies. We have the laughable situation where women are presented as superheroes on a par with men. Women are being consistently presented as equal or better than men in all that they do. And then there is the news stories in both the print and online media, as well as the television news. Just listen to it. When people are killed in sacrifice to others, like the firemen at Ground Zero on 9/11, or in wars, or in firefighting, or in the line of duty as police, you will hear police officer, firefighter, soldier. You will not hear police man, fireman, or male soldiers. Whenever the act is an act of self-sacrifice by a man, the sex of the man is removed in virtually all news reports. It is the same when men are victims of crimes. When men are victims of crimes, you will see and hear that the sex of the victim is removed in the news reports. However, when the victim of a crime is female, her sex will be repeated over and over again. Even better if she is a mother. When the victim of a crime is a mother, then the news media pulls out all stops to repeat mother over and over again. If the victim of a crime is a father, then the fact he is a father and male is airbrushed out of the news story. Similarly, if the perpetrator of a crime is a man, he is a monster and he must be severely punished. If a woman is a perpetrator of a crime, she is sick and needs help, and should not be punished because her crime could not possibly be her fault. This even extends to the crime of killing babies and children. When a man kills a baby, he is a monster and gets life. There was a case in Australia a few years back you can review on this link. A man named Arthur Freeman had been involved in a bitter divorce brought against him by his wife for some years. One day he snapped and he stopped on a bridge in Melbourne, Australia, and he threw his daughter to her death off the bridge. He argued diminished mental capacity in his trial, and this was not accepted. He was deemed sane, and he was sentenced to 32 years in prison. So a man pulls up on a bridge, throws his daughter off the bridge, and he's, after years of torment in the family courts, and he's sane and he gets 32 years. Women in Australia started petitions to bring back the death penalty. He was labelled pure evil by many people. On the other hand, Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in a bathtub on the 20th of June 2001. And what is said about her? Well, from her Wikipedia entry, quote, she had been suffering for some time with very severe postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. That's what it says on the Wikipedia entry. So you see, she was sick. She needs help. She did not have her children taken from her. Her life destroyed by a bitter ex who was hell-bent on destroying her life no matter what. She is still sick from the natural process of childbirth, something billions of other women have done before her and not killed their 5 children in a bathtub. Okay? Billions of women have had children and not killed their 5 children in a bathtub. But Andrea Yates, she is sick. She was suffering. Indeed, she had suffered so much already that many women rushed to her rescue to save her from the unjust punishment of jail for, the non-crime of murdering her 5 children. Indeed, women cannot even kill babies. Only men can kill babies. When a woman kills a baby, it is called infanticide. So that it does not sound like what it really is, being murder. Okay? Women commit infanticide, not murder. Okay? So, Arthur Freeman was tortured, criminally victimised, 4 years, and had his entire life destroyed, along with all his hopes and dreams, by a vicious, cruel, faithless wife, and driven past his breaking point, and he murdered his daughter. He's not a victim. He's not sick. He has not suffered. He is a monster, and he gets 32 years. Andrea Yates, who suffered absolutely no crimes and no persecution, murders her 5 children, and she is sick, and she has suffered, and she needs help, and she gets it. On July 26, 2006, the Texas jury in her retrial found that Yates was not guilty by reason of insanity. Quote, Andrea Yates is not sane, but Arthur Freeman is? This is equality? The bias in sentencing is the single greatest differentiating factor all across the Western world for the sentencing of a criminal. Women get far lighter sentences than men. It has become so obvious and so prominent that it has a name. It is called the pussy pass. And how many feminists are campaigning for equality in sentencing? None. Contrast that to how many women are campaigning for equal pay for equal work. When women can mobilise millions of women and men to campaign for equal pay for equal work, but there are no women campaigning for equal sentencing for equal crimes, that hypocrisy of women is laid. The hypocrisy of women is laid so bare that no one can possibly ignore it, except of course women. They can ignore this quite easily, and they do. And with that, we'll break for a short word from our sponsors. Thank you very much for returning. The point, however, is that none of these things are happening by accident. They are planned and they are caused with a purpose in mind. Now, let me show you a short clip where those who are responsible are named and their purpose is stated. You can learn more about these things via Google. But let me present the words of the now departed Aaron Russo, may he rest in peace. If you want to hear his words, then click on this link. Aaron Russo was approached by Nick Rockefeller and asked to join the Council on Foreign Relations. His full interview with Alex Jones can be found on this link. To quote Aaron Russo's words in his interview with Alex Jones, he says of an evening with Nick Rockefeller. These are Aaron Russo's words. One of the things he told me was he was at the house one night and we were talking and he started laughing and he said, "Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was all about?" And I said, I had pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. And I said, I think it was about the right to work, get equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, And he started to laugh and he said, "You're an idiot." And I said, "Why am I an idiot?" And he said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded Women's Lib, We are the ones who got it all over the newspapers and the television. The Rockefeller Foundation, he says. And do you want to know why? He says, there were two primary reasons. There were one reason, and they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before Women's Lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up their family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school as the officials as their family, not as their parents teaching them. And so those were the two primary reasons for Women's Lib, which I thought up to that time was a noble thing, But when I saw their intention behind it, where they were coming from when they created it, the thought of it, I saw the evil behind what I thought was a noble adventure. That's Aaron Russo's words, when Aaron Russo was a dying man, by the way. And there you have it. Testimony from a dying man, Aaron Russo, that Nick Rockefeller told him directly that the Rockefeller Foundation funded women's liberation, aka feminism, in order to make sure women could be taxed, meaning controlled and made compliant by the threat of a tax audit, and to get the children away from their mothers at an earlier age. And this is why you have programs like this being pushed in the UK. You can read about it on this link. The link is there. The article talks about, quote, free childcare for 130,000 more children. Number of 2-year-olds receiving free care set to double. Okay? Number of 2-year-old children receiving free care set to double. Quote, the number of 2-year-olds receiving free childcare will double as a government scheme is extended to working families on low incomes. From today, 130,000 youngsters, 20% of 2-year-olds, will be eligible for funding because their families qualify for free school meals or they are looked after by their local authority. Their local authority, remember what Aaron Russo said? Get to see the schools and the government as their family, their local authority. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg has revealed that next September the number will rise to 260,000 or 40% of the cohort. The scheme is being opened up to families that earn less than £16,910 a year and receive working tax credits. Children who have been adopted, are in care or have a disability or special educational needs will also benefit from next year. The Coalition is investing £534 million in the scheme this year, rising to £760 million in 2014-15. Parents who qualify will be able to claim up to 15 hours a week of free early education for their child. Early education. What did Aaron Russo say Nick Rockefeller told him? Aaron Russo said Nick Rockefeller told him the idea is to get the children away from their parents so they can be indoctrinated by the state. Here we have the UK introducing free childcare for 40% of 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds. Children completely unable to have any kind of critical thinking about what they're told. And it's presented as local authority. And it's presented as free despite the budget is £760 million. So it truly beggars belief that anyone can believe the headline, free childcare, when the very same article says that it's going to cost £760 million in 2014-15. The facilities and salaries for the people providing this, quote, free childcare, unquote, has to come from someone. And just because it does not come from the parents of the children, that does not mean that it is free. Someone has to pay. And who pays are men in the majority. In the UK, in 2011 or so, 72% of welfare payments go to women, while the majority of taxes are paid by men. This is not considered sexist. However, as the UK government started cutting back on welfare payments during the global financial crisis, women were up in arms and protesting that the cuts were sexist and discriminatory because they affected women more than men. I could not make up the level of self-interest and greed of women for such claims. I really couldn't. The point is that what Aaron Russo said is very true. The super rich are trying to break up families so that the children see the state as the family and the teachers and the authorities and the officials as the officials, and they are doing it in the UK by putting 40% of children of 2 years of age into free education, which is also called indoctrination. Tying this all back together for this part of this chapter, the reason that Jennifer and Prospective Wife 2.0 used the same phrases and had similar actions towards me was because they were brainwashed, propagandized, indoctrinated to believe in, quote, equality and, quote, feminism and, quote, women's liberation by the likes of the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. This propaganda is being fed to women through schools, media, universities, and all manner of channels, and women have been lapping this up for decades. Interestingly, when the fact that feminism is revealed to be communism in drag and revealed to be funded by the super rich to divide and conquer and make everyone more easy to control and govern, women never believe the truth. They keep going on with their mantra. Feminism is about equality. That's the mantra. Feminism is about equality. That's all it's about. If you don't believe in feminism, then you don't believe in equality. Really? Let me come back to a point I made in Lesson 1. Would Barack Obama have gotten a standing ovation if he said the following? And I will repeat it. Women, we are going to work between the House, the Senate, the Judiciary, and the Executive to ensure that women are equally represented in the following areas. Women will be 50% of war dead and injured. Women will be 50% of workplace dead and injured. Women will be 50% of the homeless. Women will be 50% of the incarcerated. Women will be 50% of the alimony payers and will pay 50% of all alimony. Women will be 50% of child support payers and will pay 50% of all child support. Women will be 50% of school teachers. Women will be 50% of nurses. Women will be 50% of daycare providers. Women will be 50% of bank clerks. Women will be 50% of the checkout staff at supermarkets. Women will be given the same prison sentences for the same crimes as men. We will work tirelessly, endlessly in adjusting the legislation, in taxing women and enforcing this legislation and taxation so as to be able to achieve equal representation for women across all these important areas of our society. Hooray for equality! Okay? If Barack Obama stood up in his State of the Union address and said that, would we hear cheering? Would we hear applauding? How can feminism be about equality if Barack Obama gets a big round of applause for saying equal pay for equal work when we all know he would be run out of office for saying these 12 things? We know that. In his book Animal Farm, George Orwell warned of the concept of equality being used to deceive the farmyard animals into thinking that all animals are equal. And the pigs, in the end, the pigs turned out to be a little more equal than the rest of the animals. And this is how Western women have been lied to and manipulated by a small group of dominant men. You have been lied to and manipulated by the mantra of equality, and you have swallowed that mantra hook, line and sinker. The very fact you have swallowed the idea that, quote, women are equal to men, unquote, despite the fact that every 5-year-old boy is told, quote, it is never okay to hit a girl, end quote, I was told that, reflects very poorly on your capacity for reason and logic. I am yet to have any woman explain to me why she so fervently believes in, quote, women are equal to men, unquote, and also fervently believes, quote, boys must never hit girls and women must never hit men, and men must never hit women, but girls hitting boys is funny and women hitting men is funny. I'll repeat that because I made a typo. Boys must never hit girls and men must never hit women, but girls hitting boys is funny and women hitting men is funny. Really? I invite any woman who wants to explain her notion of equality while holding that boys and men must never hit girls or women for any reason at all, while it is funny, hilarious, the stuff of sitcoms, for women to hit men in public. You can please write an essay on that and publish it in your own name in the public for all to see, and send me a link. If you, dear reader or listener, would like evidence stacked to the moon and back that the super rich, also categorized roughly as the Illuminati, funded feminism as a mechanism to destroy the family and impose global communism, I would refer you to the massive effort that Dr. Henry Makow has put into his website and his books. Henry Makow was the man who worked me up to the connection was real. Before I came to his site, I thought it was all too fantastic to believe. Indeed, I first thought Henry was a bit of a nutter. It took me 3 months to realise that he was 100% accurate in what he was saying about feminism and women's liberation. Here is his site for you to read, should you choose, and the link is there, henrymakow.com. So what does all this have to do with the disaster area called relationships and marriages today? Well, there is a well-known book called the Bible, and that has a story in it about an apple. And I'm pretty sure you all know it. The serpent sells Eve the apple, and she eats the apple. She then sells the apple to Adam, who then also eats the apple. I'm sure you can find a copy of the Bible online and go and read the details of the story if you would like to read more about it. The lesson of the apple in the Garden of Eden is simple. If you want to subvert and destroy men, then the way to go about this is to subvert the women because they are easier to subvert. Julius Caesar knew this. When the Romans were conquering Europe, they had instructions as follows. When they laid siege to a village or town, they were to offer the women and children safe passage out of the village or town so that their lives would be spared. The women were promised that they would come to no harm if only they left the village or town. They were told that if they remained in the village or town, they would be killed if the siege was successful. Naturally, being such treacherous and self-interested creatures, many women from many villages and towns took this option openly and freely. Once the village or town was emptied of women, the general was to point out to the men that there was nothing left worth dying for, since the women and children had betrayed them. They then offered the men safe passage out of the village or town if they promised not to fight the Roman army at a later date. Indeed, they were often offered to join the Roman army, or they were offered to live under Roman rule in return for never taking up arms against the Roman Empire. Having been betrayed, many men took this option. By the time the men who chose one of these options had thinned out the ranks, it was clear to the remainder that if they took on the might of the Roman army, there was no hope of success. And thus, Many sieges were not only won without a single combat death of a Roman soldier, but often the ranks of the slaves who were willing to work for the Romans for a comfortable life were added to. The image of the Romans plundering and slaughtering their way across Western Europe is not what happened at all in many cases. Since time immemorial, women have put themselves before their men and children, from the times of the Roman invasions to the Titanic, where 80% of women survived by putting themselves into lifeboats while there were children still on the Titanic. Women have put themselves in front of the welfare of their children and husbands. And this is why women were given the vote and encouraged to be independent of men. The Illuminati, the super rich who run the world governmental systems, knew full well women would vote for higher taxes on men that would be taken from men at the point of a gun and the threat of incarceration, and more social justice, meaning more welfare for women. And that is what has happened. And with that, we'll take a short word from one of our sponsors. And thank you very much for returning. To continue the story, every time women were given the vote, what they voted for was big government, welfare, higher taxes, and extorting money from men at the point of a gun and threat of incarceration so they could get more of the proceeds of the labour of men without his consent. All the while women justify these crimes with comments like, "Well, that is what the majority want, so it must be right," conveniently overlooking that 51% of adults are women who vote overwhelmingly for higher taxes and more welfare against men who make up only 49% of the adult population. Or they say things like, "The system says we can do it, so it must be okay." Or they say, "The system made me do it," conveniently overlooking personal responsibility and accountability, which is what they claim they wanted when they demanded the right to vote in the first place. Or, "If you want anything different, then you have to get enough votes to change the laws." Women say that quite frequently. Women seem to be totally clueless that the system, which is now known to contain such elements injected into it by the Illuminati as feminism and women's liberation, was so adjusted so as to throw women and men into conflict so that the ruling oligarchy was able to more easily manipulate the masses. That's what they did. And if anybody thinks the super rich are not self-interested, I've got some news for you. While men and women are busy fighting each other, they will feel less inclined to realise who the real culprits are and less inclined to cooperate and collaborate for their mutual benefit. As the saying goes, if you rob Peter to pay Paulina, you can be most assured of Paulina's continued support. And so it has become. Politicians who are told what to do by their super rich Illuminati masters constantly pander to women to buy their votes, and then they raise taxes on the men to make sure they can keep the men down. If you want to see how clueless the average woman is about the effects of demanding higher taxes for more welfare, I offer you the example of my ex-wife, Jennifer. This is how clueless she is. And this is how clueless most women is. Jennifer voted left all her life because she was the recipient of welfare when she and her first husband divorced. This was a marriage she contrived it by getting deliberately pregnant and then pretending to be a victim and demanding the shotgun wedding, only to claim a little later that her husband was abusive. She did the whole gamut, I found out later. Since Jennifer also claimed that I was abusive when I was not, her claims against her first husband must be considered baseless. In any event, she was a single mother on welfare, and since she had been a single mother on welfare, she liked the welfare state, even though the fact that it was her own doing that she wound up in that situation, and by using the welfare state, all she really did was transfer the bill for her poor decisions to some men. That's what she really did. And that was back in 1984. Very serendipitous that she was doing this in 1984. So fast forward to 1999, 15 years later. Jennifer and I were married, and that year I had a stellar year. working 15 plus hours a day all year, pretty much 13 days per fortnight, I was able to make 130% of my quota and gain an income at the time of, in Australian dollars, 210,000 from a combination of good luck, good skills and plain hard work. Few men would have done what I had done that year, but these opportunities do not come along very often and must be taken when they present themselves. At the end of the financial year, I received my tax advice. It's a little slip you get from the tax office. So I received my tax advice. I had paid a total of 96,000 Australian dollars in direct income taxes for the year. I gave the tax advice slip to Jennifer, and she flipped. She flipped. When she saw the number 96,000, she flipped. And she said, how could it be possible that the government can take so much of my money? That's what she said, my money. And notice, not our money, all right? Notice that. She was upset the government was taking her money. You know, the money that I had worked 15 hours a day, 13 days a fortnight for a whole year to earn. That, her money. I was quite livid at her comment, and I said to her, words to this effect: every time there is an election, you and I both vote. Every time I vote Conservative for lower taxes and more independent control of people's personal affairs. Every election you vote for socialism and the welfare state. You vote for higher taxes on the rich bastards, as they used to call them in Australia. The left always said, we just want higher taxes on the rich bastards, they can afford it. So you vote for higher taxes on the rich bastards to give money to single mothers and people who refuse to work like you were and like you are now. Well, someone has to pay for the single mothers and the dole bludgers. In Australia, we call someone who doesn't work a dole bludger. It's a very derogatory term. So someone has to pay for the single mothers and the dole bludgers who will not work. And that someone is the rich bastards. Well, welcome. You are now officially a rich bastard, and you and I must contribute 96,000 Australian dollars to the single mothers and the dole bludgers. And if I might note, if I do not pay this tax, they do not drag you off to jail. You are not the taxpayer. I am. If I refuse to pay, I go to jail, and you get to be on welfare. Essentially, you voted for my income to be stolen like this, and you voted that I have to pay it at the threat of going to jail if I do not. Are you pleased with voting left now? Are you pleased all your women friends vote left? Are you pleased that every year tens of thousands of dollars that we might spend on our children, pay off our mortgage, or use to our own benefit will be taken from us at the threat of me going to jail? You got what you wanted. Free welfare, and it only cost you $96,000 per year. And lastly, do I need to point out that about all we get for our $96,000 is schools for the kids? Pretty expensive schools, eh? And she was really upset that we had to pay so much in taxes. She claimed she had no idea that voting left meant higher taxes. She claimed that she voted left because the government provided free services for people in need. She claimed to have no idea that the money for these free services had to come from some man's income taxes, thereby taking money away from his wife and children. She had no idea this is what happened, she said. It's like the headline above. The headline read, free childcare for 130,000 more children. Number of 2-year-olds receiving free care set to double. And in the article it says, quote, the coalition is investing £534 million in the scheme this year, rising to £760 million in 2014-15. That's what the article says. The free childcare is going to cost £760 million. Women claim, in all honesty, that they do not know the money for free childcare has to come from some man's pay packet, such that he will not have that money to spend on his wife and children. That's what they claim. They don't know that. Those who are on the receiving end of the free money claim the people who pay the taxes I'm getting can afford it. But if such a woman was walking down the street and a homeless man, much poorer than her, stole her purse to buy food for the day, would she say, "Oh, that's okay, I can afford it, and he needed the money more than me"? Or would she say, "Help, police, I've been robbed"? Okay? Let me ask that again. If you're a woman listening to this and you were walking down the street and a homeless man in great need stole your purse to get money for food for the day, would you say, like you say to taxpayers, "That's okay, I can afford it, and he needed the money more than me"? Or would you say, "Help, police, I have been robbed"? What would you say? The natural law we all live under is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And yet Western women vote to legitimize stealing from men, because all forced taxation is stealing, and they have absolutely no problems with this legitimized stealing, the women. And so it has come to pass in marriages as well. Via the Illuminati-sponsored family law system, the women have been made the offer that if they lie about their husbands and commit perjury, they will be given vast rewards such as the kids, the house, the car, the cash, his future income, and total domination and control over the man's life. That's what they were offered. And what have women done? They have accepted that offer in their tens of millions, and they justify it based on, "The judge said it was my right. The judge said it was okay for me to lie and steal. That's okay." Never stopping to think of, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour, and thou shalt not steal." Indeed, dear lady, the vast majority of you are so indoctrinated that you do not even consider stealing from your husband as stealing. You don't even consider it that. The vast majority of you actually believe that the mere act of marrying a man entitles you to his property for the remainder of his life. You actually believe that. Let me say that again. The vast majority of you actually believe that the mere act of marrying a man entitles you as a right to his property for the remainder of his life. You are that propagandized. And while you actually believe that you have the right to steal from your husband and you have the right to tell lies about him, you are not suitable as a wife or even as a live-in house guest. While you actually believe that you have the right to steal from men, you are a very unattractive option for any man, any quality man. So you see, dear ladies, the disaster of relationships and marriage are not the fault of the average man. The disaster of relationships and marriage are the fault of the average woman. The average woman has been willing to allow herself to be brainwashed into the idea that she is better than a man and that men owe her a living merely for the fact she was born female. And that is the mindset of most women in the West now. That merely for being born a female, you are somehow owed because of a mythical oppression of women in the past. Men are now doing what men always do when faced with aggression from women. They withdraw from that aggression because they do not wish conflict with women. The vast majority are withdrawing and choosing not to fight back against your aggression. This can be seen in the many comments of women such as, "Well, why don't you men stand up for yourselves against women?" That's what women say. Many women say on many forums, "Well, why don't you men stand up for yourselves against women?" Well, I have stood up for myself against women in the West, and what did the women do? They committed further crimes against me, such as slander. They did it in their thousands, and they did it in the firm belief that they will never have to face a jury of their peers for breaking the law, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbour." Women lie about men and slander men endlessly today. And if you don't believe me, here is a good example. This is Donna Chapman, a woman who has slandered me widely. She has slandered me knowing full well she is slandering me, and she does so in the full faith that she will never be held to account. So if you are wondering, why are the men so spineless that they will not stand up against criminal women? It is because cases like mine are so well known, and I can assure you that the men who are not speaking up because they know that they will be attacked absolutely despise women like Donna Chapman. And all the women around her who support her for being criminals and criminal sympathisers, those men despise the men around Donna Chapman who do not denounce her even more. They do. And when you get vast numbers of men despising women and men, you get the ingredients for a very volatile society. After the vast majority of men who are simply withdrawing, not saying anything, there is a small minority like me saying, what is good for women is good for us men. We will fight fire with fire. We will do to them what they are doing to us. And just with that, we'll take a short break to hear a word from one of our sponsors. And thank you very much for returning. We were just talking about some men, a small minority, are saying what is good for the women is good for us men. We will fight fire with fire. We will do to them what they are doing to us. These are the men, like many on Return of Kings, the website, and other sites that teach men what is called game. They teach men how to be alphas, so as to seduce women with absolutely no intent of ever marrying them. Many of these men teach that since women lie to men, it is perfectly acceptable for men to lie to women. Under Do Unto Others, no Western woman has any complaint that some men are teaching other men to lie to them in order to seduce them. No complaints at all. Some men are teaching younger men to leave Western women alone altogether, and I'm in that camp. Having discovered how lovely Eastern European women are, I will never date another Western woman in my life for the very reasons that Western women have been so willing to hate me for being an honest man of honour and integrity, who stood up for his rights and the rights of all my brothers and their sons. The hatred that has been spewed my way for these last 6 years has completely and utterly and totally convinced me that it is simply impossible that there could even be one woman in the West that would be attractive to me as a possible future wife. And even if there were one, it is no obligation of mine to try and find her, while 99.9% plus of the rest of the women openly condone criminal acts against men. Given that Eastern European women do not condone criminal acts by women against men in the 99% majority, the direct opposite, should I eventually marry wife 2.0, you, dear reader or listener, can be absolutely certain that she will be from an Eastern European country and will have grown up behind the Iron Curtain. Lastly, there is a tiny few men like me who say, okay, I bothered to take a look at who was behind the destruction of the family, why they did what they did, how they did what they did, and what they hope to achieve, and I have created a remedy for anyone who wants it. There are almost no men who have bothered to understand the true causes of the disaster area called relationships and marriage, who have bothered to then develop remedies that will serve all parties, except, of course, the super rich who want to enslave you. I can very much assure you that I am in the tiniest of tiny minorities. It also happens to be that I am correct and that the lawful remedy I created works. Since it is women who were incited to attack men, and since the vast majority of women will keep voting for the criminal politicians to keep passing criminal legislation to enable women to steal from men, there are two aspects of this remedy to the situation. The first aspect is the men can adopt an attitude of, I will not subject myself to this criminal legal system, and I will not subject myself to any marriage, and perhaps also to any relationship with any woman who has adopted these poisonous ideas. And two, they can say, the women can adopt the attitude of, I know I am being offered the opportunity to betray my husband in the future, but I want to reject that opportunity publicly so as to step up to my claim of equality. If I am equal, I do not need criminals in the government to steal on my behalf. That's another thing that men can adopt and women can adopt. Of course, women are quite free to continue to vote for criminals in government who will pander to them more and more and create coercive and criminal legislation against men. You can continue to do that. There's no law that says you can't vote for criminals in government, right? Every time a woman casts her vote in that direction, as so many women did for Obama in 2012, she is a part of the problem and adding to the problems. She is directly causing more mayhem and strife between men and women. She is directly telling men, I think I should be able to get the government to steal from you for my benefit. That's what she's saying. Every time a woman casts a vote left, she's saying, I think I should be able to get the government to steal from you for my benefit. And the same is true for men, by the way. Every time a man casts his vote for the welfare state, he is saying that it is okay, he is okay with the idea that the government can steal from men to give money to women, because that is what those on the left of politics do in the vast majority. That's what they do, and that's what you're voting for. Of course, dear ladies, you can continue to use your shaming language on men. You can continue to say, man up and grow up and be a man and take on a wife and children. Of course, now that my second book, The Truth Be Told, is out and available, the young men are learning that this weapon of shaming language is being used to bully and coerce them into an arrangement where they stand to lose more than 100% of the proceeds of their labour to date. They even stand to lose the proceeds of their labour in the future. When I tell young men that 5% is the new 50% if you happen to be a man, I can assure you the lads are listening up close. So to say to them, man up and grow up and be a man and take on a wife and children, while I am saying to them, by the way, that might cost you your kids, your house, your car, your cash, your future income, and your business. The lads have a very clear choice in front of them. The situation, as it is that women have made absolutely no efforts to look at themselves and redeem themselves in the eyes of men. The men know that 99.9% plus of Western women openly condone and support women criminals. They know this. This is not lost on the men, and they have seen that there has been no movement at all on the side of women to deal with criminal women. Let me say that again. There has been no movement at all on the side of women to deal with criminal women, while women will turn out in their thousands to protest an internet article about women having short hair. There are a few women who are starting to realise what is going on and starting to realise that the problems of relationships and marriage in the West rest almost exclusively with women. This book is, in the first instance, directed to those few women. It is my hope that those few women who want good husbands and who want to be good mothers and good wives will read or listen to this book and take away the ideas and examples and apply them to their own lives. Those women who do apply these ideas and examples to their own lives will be much more attractive to quality men. Of course, there are plenty of beta losers out there who will marry women who want to take them to the cleaners and destroy their lives. Plenty of them. If that is what you want for a husband, a beta, father, husband, submissive, spineless, jellyfish, provider, loser, schmuck, you are in great luck, because as women have noticed, these sorts of men are in the vast majority in the West today. The metrosexual man is present in epidemic proportions all across the Western world. Single mothers raise their boys to be just what any woman would want, and they raise him to be a spineless, beta, metrosexual jellyfish. Men of my generation do not even see these young males as men at all. They are over the age of 18, they are male, but they are most certainly not men. The vast majority of Western women who are in their 20s today will never have the chance to marry a real man because the men were psychologically poisoned by women in schools, women in media, women in the home, women in the family, in being told that what women want is a sensitive new age guy. And they raised the men to be like that. And as far as I'm aware, there is no training program that will take a man who has been so ruthlessly and cruelly emasculated and make a man out of him. If there is, I do not know about it. The vast majority of these metrosexuals are resorting to tricks and techniques that take advantage of the lack of logic and reasoning in the minds of women to seduce them with absolutely no intentions of marrying them. The websites for these men who are taking money from young men for such training abound. There is no end of young men who will part with hard-earned money to learn the latest technique to manipulate women into the bedroom. No shortage at all. By displaying such rampant and blatant dishonesty, and for not valuing men as men, women have created an entire industry which is essentially lying to and deceiving women into giving up sex with absolutely no intention of marriage and children. This was created by women. The men are just responding. I put this to Sue 3 as follows in 2010. What I said has now come to pass in sites like Return of Kings. I said words back then in 2010 to the effect, I said to her, if men ever decide in any significant number that it is okay to lie to women to get sex from them with no intention of marriage, the game is over for you women. That will be the end of marriage and families as we know it. Why? Because women have only a short time to secure a man as a husband and a father. You need 1 year to meet a man and get to know him. You need another year to develop that relationship. You need 1 more year to make sure your hopes and dreams line up and that you can live together and remain together for your whole life. You need, as a minimum, 3 years to assess if this is the man you want to marry because you carry the risk if he leaves you, given that leaving a wife is now socially acceptable. And you might need longer. If at the end of that 3 years he says no for any reason, and he needs no reason, then you have to start again. Given that most women do not start this process now until they are 25, and by the age of 35 no man will marry them with prospects of children, you only have 3 chances, at most 4 chances, to find a good husband. This is what I said to her. Because not many men make really good husbands, and us men know the time pressure you women are under to find good husbands, we have, for all of human history, taken it upon ourselves to warn women if a man is not genuine in wanting to be a father and a husband. We know there are men who will lie and tell you they want to be father and husbands in order to fool a woman to get into her bed, only to reject her at the end of 3 or 4 years. So we tell women who they are, and we warn women of their less than honourable intention. This saves women a vast amount of time and effort because it eliminates the players from the pool of men you might choose from. But, Sue 3, if we ever agree in any number that we will not point out these men to women, if it ever comes to pass that men say, women have lied to us so much, I'm not going to warn her that she's being played. She deserves it for not standing up against women who ruin men's lives. If men ever say that, in large numbers, it is over for large numbers of women. They simply will not be able to tell the potential good husbands from the players. Some men are very, very good at lying to women, and given you only have 3 and at most 4 chances, if you get played a few times, then all is lost for you in terms of being able to have a family and raise the children you want. And you know what? I can see this happening, and I said this in 2010, remember? I can see this happening. Already I see many men saying, Women are lying to us to our faces, so we will not tell them who the players are. Let them suffer like we have suffered. Let them have a taste of their own medicine and see how they like it. That's what I told her in 2010. It is now a bit over 3 years since I said those words to her, and I am seeing more and more men decide they are not going to warn women who the players are. Indeed, in sites like Return of Kings, we are seeing men openly share ideas of game and how to play women to seduce them using evolutionary psychology techniques that women simply have no defense against. Women started a war against men using the government as their primary weapons. Men have started a war of return using science, logic and reason, backed with the promise of deadly force to secure their right to life, liberty and property as their primary weapons. In such a war, there can only be one outcome. Men will reign supreme. All that is left to be settled are the terms of the unconditional surrender that women will be forced to beg for at some point in time. Once the women sue for peace by begging for their offer of unconditional surrender to be accepted, then the men will decide how they will treat women in the future. That's what's going to happen. In my humble opinion, the only way that women can mitigate the terms of the peace is to start the process of reconciliation sooner rather than later, to begin the process of ending the war of the sexes sooner rather than continuing to attack men, continuing to aggress men via the agency of the state, continuing to support other women doing the same. The remainder of this book is directly addressed to women on the question of what you can do to be a good wife such that you would be an attractive option to a quality man. What you can remedy about your own way of being to be attractive to a quality man. This is aimed at you as an individual. If you want a quality man to be your husband, and you have, after reading and listening to this chapter, realized that other women have painted all Western women, all of you, with a very bad brush of reputation, then this book will tell you the steps you can take to differentiate yourself from the other women and present yourself as something of a catch to the few quality men in the West who might still be crazy enough to get married to a Western woman. Because crazy they all have to be when you have so many Eastern European and Asian women competing for your men. So that's what this book is about. So, thank you for reading or listening to this chapter. I hope I have given you some food for thought. If you like what you hear, please pass this link to the other women you know. Thank you very much for listening.